New filing in the case against Michael Sussmann filed by John Durham, the prosecuting leading the charge, trying to uncover the entire collusion hoax that was propagated by Hillary Clinton and the DNC. Michael Sussmann, of course, being indicted, investigated, charged for lying to the FBI, bringing them a bunch of information. Many people saying that he wasn't a liar at all. John Durham now saying, yeah, you were. We've got text messages and notes from the FBI to confirm it. You can see a lot of activity on the court docket here from April 4th. What we're paying attention to in this video is this, number 61, a motion in limine being filed by the United States government, John Durham and the Durham investigation, saying that we have to sort some of this stuff out. Preliminary issues, preliminary matters need to be resolved before the case goes to trial so that we don't hash all of this out in court right in front of the jurors. But let's take a look at what else is going on here for some context before we dive into what Durham is revealing to us, showing that Michael Sussmann is just a big liar. Here we see more activity on April 4th. We've got an order from the judge giving us some scheduling deadlines. Several different motions got filed from Sussmann and his defense. Number one, they filed a motion in limine to stop the prosecution from bringing in evidence about the attorney-client relationship. We have another one that we're going to see sort of a response to from John Durham in this motion. We see here the defense filed what's called a motion in limine to exclude testimony and evidence from two people that we are going to dive into today, learn a lot more about because Durham references them in his motion. And what's interesting here is all of these are sort of stacking on top of one another. And so we sort of are seeing issues come in, but not necessarily responsive of one another. So we see here that Sussmann is interested in two people's testimony, Director Bill Price-Step over from the FBI, as well as General Counsel Tricia Anderson. Okay, these are two people. The defense is saying, we don't want their notes coming in. We don't want their testimony coming in. Sussmann thinking that if they come in, this is going to be really bad for my case. So they filed a motion to keep them out. It's called a motion in limine. It's a preliminary type of motion meant to exclude or to include certain evidence so that we don't fight about it in front of the jurors. Here, April 4th, Sussmann says, keep them out. We're going to see that Durham is saying, we got to make sure that they come in. And we're going to see why. Then we also have on April 4th, another one, a motion to dismiss the case if Rodney JOFFE is not immunized. Made an entire separate video on that if you want to watch what happened in item 59. And then we see that the defense is also filing a motion in limine to stop certain evidence from coming in from the Steele dossier. So a lot of activity there. And finally, we get John Durham, number 61, and an order from the judge. So let's get into it now. We've got item 61, the government's motion in limine. The government now saying, well, we don't really want to preclude too much. We want to make sure all of this is included because we've just got a heck of a case. And judge, we want to make sure you're going to hear it all. So Sussmann is the defendant here. Durham bringing this motion and saying, look, Your Honor, you just read through all of the defense arguments for keeping a lot of this out. Here's what we want to make sure we get. Saying the United States comes by special counsel John Durham and respectfully moves here a motion in limine for the admission and exclusion of certain evidence. Let's see what's in here. There's some juicy stuff. Number one, admit witnesses' contemporaneous notes of conversations with the FBI general counsel. We've got pictures of that, of what the FBI agents were writing down as general counsel came and communicated to them his conversation with Sussmann. Okay, so we've got sort of a game of telephone going on, but it's contemporaneous notes. They wrote it down right as they heard it, more or less. Here, they want that in. Number two, emails that came across in the indictment, referenced in the indictment. We're going to look at some of those. And then you can see this is sort of a big 48-page motion. And so we're not going to cover it all, but we are going to take a look at those two spicy bits. Then you can see they're trying to exclude evidence of political bias on behalf of special counsel. So Durham saying, look, if they want to come in here and talk about why I'm a MAGA Trumper or whatever, none of that's relevant. None of that's appropriate. All of that should be precluded. Talking also about admitting certain acts and statements from Sussmann's congressional testimony. Remember, he sat down and talked about a lot of this stuff in part of that conversation. One of his answers was, in my opinion, directly stating that he was working for somebody else, which contradicts what he told the FBI. So in congressional testimony, yeah, I was there working for somebody. Told the FBI I wasn't there working for anybody. So the government, of course, here, Durham, wants to make sure that comes in because that's not going to be too good there for old Sussmann. And then lastly, we see why the government wants all of this admitted, including Hillary Clinton's tweet that came out October 31st, 2016. And that's leading right up until the election. That's November, right? We've got the election coming up for 2016, Trump versus Clinton. October 31st comes around. Hillary Clinton gets news of this Trump-Russian collusion. Boom, hits the tweet. And that might show that there is more collusion there, but not between Trump and Russia. Maybe between Clinton and Sussmann. So let's see what the factual background looks like. You can see I've got some photographs of some of the people down here at the bottom to help us keep tabs on what's going on. A lot of text. We're going to try to get through it without jumping out the window. Here, the defendant is charged with 1-count indictment, making a materially false statement. Now, we know who that is. That's Sussmann down there at the bottom. As set forth in the indictment, very important date. We've got September 19, 2016, less than 2 months before the presidential election. Here we have the defendant, Michael Sussmann, down here. We have a lawyer at a law firm, one, which of course we know now is Perkins Coie, serving as counsel to Clinton. Perkins Coie, Mark Elias was also over there along with Sussmann. General counsel to the Clinton campaign. So we have now Sussmann, who's over there, meets with FBI general counsel at FBI headquarters in DC. Who is that person? This guy right here, Jim Baker. We're going to see a text message in the next slide from Sussmann over to James, general counsel for the FBI. The defendant provided FBI general counsel with purported data and, quote, white papers that allegedly demonstrated a covert communications channel between Trump and Alpha Bank, this Russian bank, okay? Collusion, allegedly, from these people. The indictment Durham filed against Sussmann says the defendant lied in that meeting. He falsely stated to James Baker, general counsel, that he was not providing the allegations to the FBI on behalf of anybody else. In fact, that's not true at all. He had 2 clients, specifically according to Durham in the indictment. Number 1, this guy, tech executive number 1, Rodney Joffe, and number 2, Hillary Clinton. Because Perkins Coie was the campaign lawyer for the campaign. We move on. Durham now tells us, indeed, on September 18th, 2016, and remember that date we talked about? September 19th. Oh yeah, they had a meeting where all of that took place, but something interesting happened the night before. 7:24 p.m., the night before the defendant met with the general counsel, the defendant conveyed in writing the lie. The same lie that was sent the following in the following text message. He sends this over to Jim's personal cell phone. Jim is general counsel for the FBI. Jim, it's Michael Sussmann. I have something time sensitive, parentheses, and sensitive, I need to discuss. Do you have availability for a short meeting tomorrow? I'm coming on my own, not on behalf of a client or company. Want to help the Bureau. Thanks. Oh, come on. All right. So sounds like a nice guy. Just wants to go help the Bureau. He's sort of like Jack Bauer or something. I've got some critical information. I'm just trying to help. All right. So he goes and says that over. And what's emphasized here, I'm coming on my own, not on behalf of a client or a company. All right. Now pay attention to that because we're going to see what the FBI agents wrote down about this relationship. FBI general counsel responded, and remember who's in office right now, right? These are all Obama's FBI and FBI people, says, okay, I'll find a time. What might work for you? I'm not doing anything at the FBI anyway, so just let me know, swing on by. Remember that January 6th hasn't happened yet, so they didn't have a bunch of Where's Waldo books around with their highlighters yet. They had a lot of extra time while they were not, I guess, preparing for that. To which the defendant replied, anytime but lunchtime, you name it. So both these guys have pretty light schedules, I guess. They're just sitting around concocting fake dossiers and waiting for, I guess, tragedy. So this goes on. We now have a text message that confirms Sussmann's a liar, right? He knew what he was doing, and he went and told the FBI that he was not there on behalf of anybody else. We have his congressional testimony saying he was there on behalf of other people. This wasn't just a flub. He says, I'm coming on my own, not on behalf of a client or a company, affirmatively saying I'm independent here. Turns out that wasn't true. The defendant's billing records reflect that the defendant here repeatedly billed the Clinton campaign for his work on these allegations. Okay, so all of this stuff that he was so time sensitive and sensitive, concerned about bringing over to the FBI, that wasn't on behalf of anybody else. Well, as soon as he was done with that, he just drafted up a bill and sent that over to the Clintons. Here, it's work for meeting with the FBI. In compiling and disseminating these allegations, the defendant, Ed Rodney, tech executive number one, also had met and communicated with another law partner at law firm one, who was also then serving as general counsel to Clinton. That was Mark Elias. That's the guy who runs Democracy Docket, who was responsible for all of the Trump litigation. He was paraded. The Democrats put him on their shoulders and carried him around after the election because they're like, this guy is really great. He got us and he helped us win. After this last election, not the 2016 election. That's Mark Elias in this Trump versus Biden saga. Same guy. Back in 2016, he was still crawling around the holes with these people. You see here, this goes on. The indictment also alleges now that in addition to that, Sussmann went and met with the FBI, said, I'm not with anybody, sent a text message, I'm not with anybody. Turns out he was billing Clinton for it. Also, the indictment has some other things to dive into, telling us that beginning in July of 2016, tech executive number one, this fella, Rodney, was working with Sussmann, the defendant, a U.S. investigative firm retained by Perkins Coie, law firm one, where Sussmann worked, where Elias worked, on behalf of the Clinton campaign, the, quote, U.S. investigative firm. All right. Numerous cyber researchers and employees at multiple internet companies assemble purported data and white papers. This is where we're going to see all of this sort of research teams and internet researchers start to come up. This guy was responsible for it. In connection with these efforts, Tech Executive One exploited his access to non-public and proprietary internet data. He had the assistance of researchers at a US-based university who were receiving and analyzing large amounts of internet data in connection with a pending federal government cybersecurity research contract. Okay, so we have like secret access to research projects that give him proprietary access to data. Tech executive number one tasked these researchers to mine internet data to, quote, establish an inference and, quote, a narrative tying then candidate Trump to Russia. To do so, in doing so, JOFFE indicated he was seeking to please certain, quote, VIPs, referring to individuals at Perkins Coie and the Clinton campaign. So he's not working with them, but this guy is just antsy to go to those cocktail parties. He wants to be an ambassador to whatever. He wants to go and just hang out with Clinton and talk about what an orange monster Trumpo is. So he's just really excited about, doing good for them because a lot of these people just love to lick boots. Here, the government's evidence at trial will also establish that among internet data, tech executive number one and his associates exploited was the domain name system, the DNS system, the internet traffic pertaining to particular healthcare providers. So remember, they get sort of access to this government research cybersecurity project. That means they get access to sort of the backbone skeleton of the internet where they can interfere with DNS or sort of, glean off, exploit the DNS system, which is a pretty important system since if you want to go to, google.com or amazon.com or facebook.com, you got to type in that word. And then that word goes to DNS, the domain looks up that word, says, oh, go to this number. And then you go to that number because the computers don't talk with, the language like we do. So we have a DNS that translates the language. They're jacking into the back skeleton of this structure in order to surveil certain properties. What are these? Well, we've got number one, certain healthcare provider, healthcare company one. Number two, look what we've got. Trump Tower. Kind of important building when you're running against that person. Hillary Clinton running against Trump. They're monitoring all of his traffic from Trump Tower. It's not just that. Also, Donald Trump's Central Park West apartment building and the executive office of the presidency. Meaning this continued on beyond the election. They just didn't say, oh, I guess we lost and we're just going to stop surveilling everything. No, they kept monitoring it. The indictment continues, says that it further details that on February 9th, 2017, of course, the election's already over, Trump's in office now, the defendant provided an updated set of allegations, including the Russian Bank One data and other allegations to another government agency. We know he already went to the FBI. Agency 2 turns out CIA. The government's evidence at trial will establish that these additional allegations relied on that traffic that they assembled. They went in and they got that information from Trump Tower, from Trump's New York office, from the executive office of the presidency back in February 9th, 2017. These people were watching Trump in the presidency. And healthcare number one. In his meeting with the agency 2, the defendant provided data which he claimed reflected purportedly suspicious DNS lookups provided by the entities and these IP addresses from a Russian mobile phone provider. Now, we're going to see what JOFFE's own researchers said about all of this in a minute. But this is what they did. The defendant further claimed these lookups demonstrated Trump and his associates were using Russian-made wireless phones called these JOFFE phones in the White House and other locations. So you see this little scheme they've got here? Oh, Trump's looking up certain Russian websites. And the DNS takes the name of, RT.com and translates it to 181.127.151.002, whatever. And you go over there to that website. And they're saying all of that is indicative. It means that they must have these JOFFE phones and people are calling in Russian. It's all nonsense. But they go to the FBI and the CIA to communicate that. This goes forward and says, when he met with the agency 2 employees at the CIA, the defendant made a substantially similar false statement. Same one he made to the FBI general counsel. In particular, the defendant asserted he was not representing a particular client in conveying the allegations. In truth, and in fact, the defendant was continuing to represent at least Rodney Joffe, a fact the defendant acknowledged back in 2017 in December when he testified in front of Congress. Now, he did, and this goes through and it details the transcript, and you can see him say, yeah, I was there for somebody else. And that directly contradicts his testimony that he gave to the FBI. Now, Durham, in this filing, gave this little footnote, and there's always some extra spice in the footnotes if you look closely enough. So it says here, a fact the defendant acknowledged under oath before Congress, but when Sussmann was testifying in front of Congress, he did not identify the client by name. Who was that? Clinton. And why didn't he identify her by name? Well, footnote number 2 tells us this. It says, pretty obvious. By February 9, 2017, the Clinton campaign, for all intents and purposes, no longer existed. Wah, wah, wah. And so that's just a reminder to Hillary, you lost to Trump. Oh, man, that sucks, doesn't it? For you, not for America. Here, argument goes on. They say witnesses' note of conversations with the FBI should be admissible. So remember, we sort of got into the weeds there a little bit. This is a motion in limine. The defense here from Sussmann wants to keep a lot of this stuff out. They don't want these notes coming in. They don't want any evidence about any of this nefariousness to come in. It's going to wreck their case. So they want to keep it all out. The prosecution wants it all in. They're saying all of this has to come in. In particular, let's talk about the notes that these 2 people over at the FBI took. We've got Bill, you can see here with the red arrow, and then we've got Tricia Anderson and Bill Priestep, who are both at the FBI. Let's talk about them because they wrote some notes down. We're going to take a look at them. Here on September 19, 2016, soon after he met with the defendant, so we now know that General Counsel James Baker down here met with Sussmann. They had a conversation. Sussmann texted him and said, hey, what are you doing tonight? You busy? You bored? Hey, it's me. And Baker's like, no, not too much. How about you, HBU? What do you want to do? So those are going on. They meet up. They have a conversation about how terrible Trump is. FBI General Counsel then goes and meets with 2 other people. We've got the assistant director, who is Bill, and then we have the deputy general counsel, who is sort of one person under James. This is Tricia. Tricia and Bill are now having conversations and communicating with these officials. Baker relayed the details of his meeting with Sussmann back over to them, including the defendant's specific reputation and representation that he was not there on behalf of any client. Okay, so Baker is communicating that now to these 2 people. I met with Sussmann. Sussmann is not here on behalf of anybody else. Got it. Both the assistant director and the deputy general counsel. These two people took contemporaneous notes, which is good. They should. They should write that stuff down. The assistant director wrote the following in his FBI notebook. Let's read it. Michael Sussmann, number 1. You can see his name is written out here. Attorney Perkins Coie. Oh, that's curious. Does he know anything about Perkins Coie? He probably does, because they're a pretty big law firm. Let's see if he has any bullet points for them. Underneath. Oh, yeah. Represents the DNC, the Clinton Foundation, etc. Oh, well, okay. So they're coming here with a bunch of Trump smear dossiers, I guess they're calling it. And they're going to tell us that this is all problematic, but they sort of work for the opposing party. So that might bias the credibility of this information just a smidge. Or maybe not. Maybe you're just the FBI and you don't care. Also says that Perkins Coie represented former DOJ officials, which I'm sure they know a lot about, and been approached by a prominent cyber people, academic, corporations, and POCs. Huh, curious. Now, taking a look at Michael Sussmann, we want to make sure this information is credible. We have the director, the assistant director writes here, said not doing this for any client. Oh, all right. Well, there you go. So let's just ignore this. Clinton Foundation represents DNC, represents former DOJ, been approached by certain cyber people, academic, none of that stuff matters. Let's see here. But was he doing this on behalf of anything that would prejudice him? No. He said he wasn't doing this for anybody else. Oh, well, that's really good. Because if he would have come here and communicated all of this to us on behalf of Clinton campaign, well, maybe we couldn't have looked into it. We give a box here. People like, don't know who's in that box. I wonder what list of names were put in there. We have some more notes. Foreign power contacting Trump org. Wow. All right. New York Times, Washington Post, or Wall Street Journal on Friday is going to publish this. And so Michael Sussmann is just out there communicating this with clean and pure intentions. He just wants to help America. They're going to publish this, and this is going to be a national security risk. Well, Durham's going to address that, because what it turns out to be is that they kind of created this whole thing, which is why he knew that it was going to be published. Curious. Secret Trump org server that has comms with Alpha Bank. Okay. Connected to the Kremlin and a hospital, Spectrum Health, used as a communication mode through Tor. So Trump is connected to the Kremlin. You see how ridiculous this is? Donald Trump has a secret server. Never mind Hillary Clinton's emails or her server or any of that stuff. Trump has a secret server that has communications with Alpha Bank connected to the Kremlin. He's funneling money through Spectrum Health in Michigan, I think. And they're communicating through Tor, which is, sort of a secret communications network that is very difficult to trace. Okay. And all of this is taking place on behalf of Donald Trump. And he's been hiding all of this for the last however long he's been in the public eye. All right. Okay. So another something came out later, about 3 to 4 weeks, Trump org contacting foreign nations. And this person says he has a Tor expert. And so they're going into Tor. These people are just, this is what's going on at the FBI. All right. So here, Sussmann is somebody else. This is Tricia Anderson, who also took notes. And you can see the notes, this is a little bit messy here for this FBI agent. This one's a little bit more feminine, a little cursive. We see 9/19/16, Sussmann met with Baker, Jim Baker, who we already learned about. No specific client. Interesting. One of her first notes. Oh, not here on anybody else, on behalf of anybody, but a group of cyber academics talked with him about research. Articles coming out this Friday, New York Times, Wall Street Journal, whatever, right? So I guess that's all you need to do is to get a meeting with the FBI. Just call them and tell them you're just an interested citizen and you work with cyber academics. But those people don't get text message contacts with general counsel, do they? No. So general counsel, like Perkins Coie lawyers, why does he have access to general counsel at the FBI? I wonder if maybe there were some ulterior motives going on here. I don't know. But there were some problems with the research that allegedly was tying all of this together. And this is something else that Durham wants in. Durham wants to make sure that this can come in so they can show these emails to the jurors. In particular, these emails involving tech executive number 1, JOFFE, and the internet researchers. So let's go through this. This is really wild. The people who are working on this project know what a garbage, corrupt project it is. And they start sort of a mutiny, really, on the other end until Rodney comes in and calms everybody down. For example, on August 20th, as we're leading up into the election, Originator 1, somebody who's on the research team working for JOFFE, who's sort of working at the direction, in my opinion, of Sussmann, Perkins Coie, Mark Elias, and that entire nest of people, following a lengthy email, which is quoted in the indictment. Remember, this is a defense that keeps coming out. It's not in the indictment. And the defense and the prosecution says, yes, it is. It's paragraph 23H, like they did here. Note, the Russian money launderers. This is an email that's coming from somebody working on this case, investigating Donald Trump at the behest of JOFFE. Says note, right? Puts this in a forum somewhere. The Russian money launderers, sometimes assisted by Americans, like those you see listed in the PDF that JOFFE shared with us. So JOFFE sent these people a list of Trump associates. Okay, and he's saying, basically go find everything you can, dirt on these people. He says, and others you'll see in names like this. He says Cyprus is one of the places they like. That's where Russian banks are located. He says go through and choose a .com or a .ru when studying their domains. And remember, we don't need a Russian internet provider, a domain, or a company just to show that money is going from the Russians over to Trump. So they're concocting this whole scheme. They say that this Russian bank has massive tentacles in many countries, including the USA. And so regarding this whole project, my opinion is that from DNS, all we could gain, even in the best case, is an inference. Do you see what that says? It's all we can do is an inference. There are these banks all over the place. We can go through, we can look all of this up. That's all we can get. An inference. It says, I have not the slightest doubt in my mind. Okay, listen, just to be clear about this. I don't have the slightest doubt that illegal money and relationships exist between Trump and Russia. Meaning actual people very close to Trump, if not himself. And by Putin's traditional style, people Putin controls, but not himself. He controls the oligarchs and they control the fortunes that cross all the industries. But he says, oh, that's true. Okay, look, don't get mad at me. Don't kick me out of this club. I hate Trump just as much as you do. All right. But even if all that's true, even if what we found, even if we went and got what JOFFE wants us to get, and we find DNS, we don't see the money flow. We don't see the content of the message. Someone saying, send me money here or something like that. So that's like, what are we going to get? Just people going to different websites and things. We don't see anything that's going to be useful. But he says, how about this? I've got a plan. He says, I could fill out a sales form on 2 websites, faking the other company's email address in each form and cause them to appear to communicate with each other in DNS. And other ways I can think of, and I feel sure, that another researcher here can think of. So we could do that. We could fake these communications, okay? And if JOFFE can take the inference that we gain through this team exercise, and cause someone to apply more useful tools of more useful observation, study, or questioning, then maybe we can work to develop an inference that may be worthwhile. Oh, okay. So he's sort of saying, well, we got to just get this thing moving. We got to push the snowball down the mountain. So let's create a little bit of fake conversation first. And then maybe that's going to catch some eyeballs. And then that will help us use more tools to go and investigate even harder. But until we sort of make something there, we're not going to be able to discover what is actually there. Because only by making something there can we create the tools that are needed to investigate, to go find the stuff that we know is there, but that we haven't been able to find. So it's very complicated. So what he's saying here is, I know, let's just go start making this all up. He says, that is how I at least understood the task, okay? He's like acknowledging it. Let's just go make this up. Like he's saying, I'm understanding he's telling us to make this up without making this up. That's why he keeps putting these asterisks around inference, okay? He knows what he's doing. He says, that is how I understood the tasks. Because JOFFE didn't tell me more context or specific things, this is what I'm getting. Says what blank has been digging up is going to wind up being significant. It's just not the case that you can rest assured that Hillary's opposition research or whatever professional governments or journalists are also digging, they just don't all come up with the same things or interpret them the same way. But if you find any benefit in what she has done or is doing, you need to say so to encourage her. Because here, we are both killing ourselves here every day out here for weeks, trying to come up with something. And researcher number 2 is like at wit's end, doesn't know what to do about any of this stuff. And so we can't find any of this stuff. The stuff you tell us to find is not going to be useful or consequential because it's not relevant. So I think what you're saying is you want us to sort of make it up and then just give it to you. Is that right? I think what she's finding is going to be useful. But if you want this, you need to tell us to encourage her. Okay, because we're both killing ourselves. So is this like what you want? You want us to keep making this up? Yes or no? So he responds. He says, yeah, look, I know the task is broad. All right, indeed. Being able to provide evidence of anything with double asterisks that shows an attempt to behave badly in relation to this, the VIPs would be happy. Saying yes, anything. I don't care what you come up with. Find it. Don't tell me how, just do it. They're looking for a true story that could be used as a basis for closer examination. They haven't been able to find a true story. He says, so the prior hypothesis was all they needed. A mail server dedicated or related to Trump configured with an ACL and with traffic almost exclusively with Russia Bank 1 was sufficient to do the job. Thanks for making that up. Even though there was no evidence of financial exchange, there was clear communication. Clear communication. Some people had a conversation with a Trump server and a Russian bank. Was anybody on that network just going to a Russian bank website and there's one. Great. Perfect. Who knows? He says Trump has claimed he and his company have no dealings with .ru other than a failed casino, Miss Universe, and others. He said absolutely no interaction with financial institutions. So now they're going to say, that's not true, you liar. You did have a communication because somebody on your network, that of course is massive, right? Trump has buildings all over the world. Somebody communicated with a Russian bank somewhere. Their own researchers acknowledging these Russian banks are all over the world. They're all over the United States. It has tentacles that go everywhere. So what? Is that good enough? He says, yeah, that's good enough because we're not looking for anything real. We just need something that they can magnify and turn into a big hogwash story. You've got exactly that. He says, so any potential like that would be the jackpot. That's what they delivered. And it was something that they ran with. Another researcher expresses concerns with this. August 22nd now, still before the election, sends an email over to JOFFE Tech Exec number 1. He says, listen, this research project is flawed. Doesn't even feel like we're doing any research here. He writes, all right, here, Rodney, let's think for a moment of the best case scenario where we're able to show somehow, he writes, that the DNS, whether it's MX or otherwise, which I think is like mail servers, and communication exists between Trump and Russia. Let's say that we're able to show this. We don't know how to do it. Let's say we can. How do we plan to defend against the criticism that this is not just spoofed UDP traffic we are observing, right? Because people can just fake that. You mean you can just like fake that entire thing? Yes, you can. How are we going to defend against that? He says, well, there's no answer to that. Based on what I can tell, he says, let's assume again that they are not smart enough to refute our best case scenario. He says, JOFFE, do you realize that we're going to have to expose every trick we have in our bag to even make a very weak association? You understand this? Let's all reflect upon that for a moment. He writes, sorry, folks, but unless we combine net flow and DNS traffic controlled at critical points between the suspect organizations, we cannot technically make any claims that would fly public scrutiny. We can't. This is not a typical attribution problem when the two parties are defenders versus attackers that are clearly separated. In this case, we will not only have the Trump folks trying to shoot this down, but all the privacy freaks trying to come up with a crazy conspiracy theory on how we obtained the data. Right? Because you've got private access through your government contract. Sorry to say this, we are nowhere close to coming with a plan to attack this problem that will fly in the public domain. The only thing that drives us at this point is that we just do not like Trump. Finally, truth. This will not fly in the eyes of public scrutiny, folks. I'm afraid we have tunnel vision. Time to regroup? From somebody at JOFFE's organization with a little bit of a conscience? Look, we're trying to make up and fabricate something here. Sussmann JOFFE, the entire DNC from the Clinton team. Nobody wants that email to come in because that will wreck their case. You see here, billing records further reflect that on September 12th, just 1 week prior, defendant Mark Elias and others communicated about the efforts to share these allegations with Newspaper One. Now we see how Clinton and Mark were involved in all of this. In addition, then, campaign lawyer number one, Elias, provided an update to Clinton, and he billed it as email correspondence with the name of the foreign policy advisor, Jake Sullivan, name of campaign manager and communications director about the article. Updated him on the article, sent him a bill about the article. Then, on the same day that those articles were published, Hillary Clinton posted a tweet about it on her Twitter account, meaning she sort of was simultaneously prepared for this thing. She knew the article was coming. Said computer scientists have apparently uncovered a covert server linking Trump to Russia. What? Apparently, your law firm hired those people to do it. They were on your payroll, Hillary, apparently. The tweet included a statement from campaign advisor Jake Sullivan, who's now the national security advisor for the Biden people. It's all just a big club, right? They all just go to the same parties from one election to the next. Advisor made a reference to the media. He wrote in the article, this could be the most direct link yet between Donald Trump and Moscow. This secret hotline may be the key to unlocking the mystery of Trump's ties to Russia. We can only assume that federal authorities will now explore a direct connection between Trump and others. This was posted October 31st. Look at this. This is their October surprise. Everybody's upset that, Hillary was getting all this scrutiny about her emails and servers and all this. And so she came out with her own little fake story. And they hustled it through and they dropped it literal days before the election took place. We've got Jake Sullivan comes out, who where'd he go? Harvard or Oxford or somewhere, whatever. Just been in the United States government wrecking things for a long time now. He wrote this saying, the line of communication, he's calling on the government, the bizarre adoration of Vladimir Putin. It's the same stories. They're recycling the same stories. This is what we hear repeatedly about Donald Trump. It's the same stories. Now it's just a different problem. Now we're talking about Ukraine. So we see here that came out. The fact, according to Durham, that the Hillary Clinton campaign immediately issued a tweet concerning the articles after receiving foreknowledge of these issues from Perkins Coie and Mark Elias is probative of the defendant-client relationship. So the government, they say, is going to offer this evidence to prove, among other things, one of the defendant's primary goals in his work on the Russian bank was to generate negative publicity concerning Donald Trump that would benefit Hillary Clinton. And as such, they say this should all be admissible and it's not hearsay. And so, of course, a lot of this is going to be argued to be hearsay. These are out-of-court statements that are being made to prove the truth of the matter that's being asserted here. And they're going to say none of that should come in. Durham is saying all of these are exceptions. These are exceptions to the hearsay rules, or under the rules, they are just not hearsay under the rules, and so they should come in. And so that is the entirety of the highlights of the motion. Really quite good. A lot of juicy stuff in there if you want to read it. Please go check out the full thing. You can see this submitted over here by Jonathan Algor, Andrew DeFilippis, Michael Keelty, Britton Shaw. And in their haste, we got a typo, don't we? Yeah, we do. The court should grant the government's motion in limine. Grant it or grant it. Either way, it's a juicy one. And there's going to be a lot more coming because, as we know, it sounds like this thing is gearing up for a trial. Doesn't sound like there's any possibility that this thing settles. Both sides are gearing up, teeing off their motions in limine both directions. And so we're going to continue to follow it along as this case continues to progress forward. It's going to get more complicated. And so I hope that you continue to join us as we break these down. I anticipate, because of the length and because of the quantity of the motions, breaking these down essentially filing by filing as they come through. Not all of them. Some of them are quite boring and bland, but the juicy ones like this we'll continue to cover. And I want to see where this case goes. I hope you join us on that journey. I would love it if you subscribed, left a comment, like this video. Let me know how you liked it. I look forward to seeing you on the next one.